if the brain isn't optimized through sleep, through nutrition, through healing the inflammation, the chronic inflammation, if that's not optimized, your mind is not going to be optimized.
Yeah.
You're going to be thinking poorly, you're going to be acting poorly, you're going to be tired, all these different things. So if you want your mind to be sharp, you got to make sure your brain is healthy and recovered and healed. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
It's true. If we're just going to be, again, looking at this from a very foundational, simple principle, it's much more difficult to think the thoughts that we want to think when we don't feel well.
Right. When we don't feel well, we start to think bad thoughts.
It comes together.
It's hard.
It comes together because of so much of our biology is driving our lives, how we feel. But this is the thing, and everybody's seeing this example. We can think externally of our biology. We can change our thoughts and change what's happening with our biology instantly, because every thought that you think has correlating chemistry that's released.
Really?
And
Give me an example.
So right now,
your wife, in a loving way.
Man. So I'm gonna start releasing a little bit of oxytocin, a little bit of maybe a little dopamine, a little serotonin
in the brain.
Yeah.
Which then releases.
But it also depends on the thoughts as well. If it's some sexy thoughts, it might be a little adrenaline or epinephrine produced. Just like that, a little bit more aggression might come forward. It just depends. But also, if, for example, we have a thought where something bad is happening right now, where we're thinking about, maybe we're worried about somebody that we care about. Maybe they've been in some type of an incident of some sort, but maybe we heard some news about it, but it's not true. Okay, so maybe we heard that somebody that we love got into an altercation, right? And we're just like, really upset, like, oh my, I can't believe this happened, I can't believe whatever, and we can start to produce these chemicals associated with that stress. So much more cortisol, right? So a lot of people know about cortisol. Cortisol is not a bad guy. We've talked about this before.
Right.
It's a big part of our evolution.
Too much of it consistently hurts you.
Especially and chronically. So we start to release all these neurotransmitters, neuropeptides, hormones, all driving us towards worry, fear, anger, regardless if the situation is real or not.
Right.
That's the rub.
We make it up.
So we can think external. We can think beyond our current circumstances and change our biology. But if our biology is in a tough place, it's harder to keep trying to do that.
So our thoughts shape our biology. Our thoughts shape
Absolutely.
Our feelings,
your thoughts create your body.
Your thoughts create the body.
So now we get into.
Wow.
I'm going to bring her up one more time.
Yes.
Caroline's work.
She's great.
Yeah. So we had a great conversation about that as well. And actually, an interview that I did with her, it came out recently, and we put our toes in that conversation a little bit more, because this is kind of difficult for us to think about today, because we've been so inundated with the genetic dominant theory that our genes are controlling our lives. And now today, of course, I believe just about everybody listening has heard the term epigenetics at this point, and how these are above genetic controls, like epidermis, like your skin, the outermost part of your skin. So epigenetics is controlling your genetic expression, right? And so humans collectively have got maybe 20,000, 22,000 genes collectively. But I think that's gonna play out, and you're hearing it here first. I think that number is not quite accurate, but when they did the Human Genome Project, that's what they discovered.
Right.
But why are we so different? It's because of the expression of the genes. There can be 1,000 different outpicturings of one gene, and it could code or express what we would deem to be something negative. But even the negative things are trying to push us towards health. Our body is always adapting, trying to help us to survive.
Trying to realign us and saying, this is not good, you need to pay attention to this and fix it.
Yeah. Even with obesity, our bodies are trying to save us.
How so?
Trying to save us. So, for example, when we bring in an abnormal amount of sugar, like the way that humans evolved, we didn't have access to sugar like that.
Right.
If you come across a beehive or something, like you're gonna risk getting stung to get some of that. All right. But today we've taken that.
Just here, eat it all day long. Everything.
It's so remarkable how, and for me, it's a very simple principle of biology.
When did we start getting sugar accessible in this country? What year or decade was this where it's like, oh, sugar's available now?
Here's the beautiful thing. We've always had a hankering for sugar, like through our evolution. We'd go towards,
fruit,
like I said,
and this,
we'd go for those things, especially, but also is available for some
cultures only certain times a year, for example. And so you would rack up on it as well.
Yeah.
And now this is an important tenet as well. Because, and there's a reason for this, the human brain itself, if we think about the blood-brain barrier that protects the brain and only allows in certain things, certain nutrients, it only has gates for certain gases like oxygen, for water, only certain nutrients get into the brain. The brain has its own exclusive diet. But there are a lot of sugar gates. Your brain will gladly confiscate. Harvard researchers uncover this. Your brain will gladly sop up half of the sugar that you take in a meal.
You take 50 grams of sugar, 50% of that, 25 grams is going into the brain.
Going to your brain.
How's it? Where's it going? Does it go throughout all the brain? Does it go to a section of the brain? What happens? Is it and it's just filtered throughout, and you're just on a sugar high?
Yeah. So even the term sugar high, like it's kind of funny, but that's not funny.
Right.
It's not funny because what happens is, so there are these protein gates that allow the sugar to transfer over through the blood-brain barrier into the brain itself, and because many of the neurons run off of glucose. So your brain is like, look, give me that. We got stuff to do. Well, let me take all of it. But what happens is over time is it starts to create insulin resistance in the brain as well. All right. So this is one of the biggest issues facing our world today. And if we get into the conversation about inflammation, neuroinflammation, I believe is the most troubling issue that we're facing as a society. But it's a hidden, overlooked issue because the brain is so protective. We don't really know that this is going on until oftentimes it's too late, because the brain itself, we talked about the symptoms of inflammation, pain, swelling, burning. The brain itself doesn't have pain receptors. So your brain can tell you about pain in your pinky toe or on your, pain in your neck, but pain within the brain itself, it doesn't have pain receptors.
What about like a migraine or something? Is that not?
Migraines are not the brain directly expressing pain. It has a lot to do with, now this is a little bit more complicated. There are some offshoots of things happening within the brain with migraines, let me be clear. So let's just take the borderline, migraines are different also. People who experience migraines, they know that it's different, but from a headache. But we'll just take that borderline experience, maybe like an acute migraine or maybe a tough headache. What it really is the blood vessels that surround the brain, that surround your skull, all right, not the brain, but that's surrounding your neck and your shoulders. And so muscle spasms and things of that nature can start to kind of cause restriction, right? So, but there can be some electrical storms taking place in the brain for sure.
Interesting.
But anyway, so the brain itself doesn't experience pain. So this is why, for example, there's, you can have a brain surgery and
not feel
like,
you're
you
awake.
can be awake, and it's
That's
just like
nuts, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so weird.
Wasn't there someone who was like playing violin on a brain surgery? They like opened the head and just like to see if she could still play or make sure there was.
That's like some Total Recall stuff.
That's crazy, man.
Where's Arnold? That was crazy.
That's some like
it's amazing, man. But these are really overlooked simple principles. But going back to that tenet of inflammation. So if the brain can't experience the pain, how do you know when it's on fire? How do you know when it's inflamed?
The brain, you don't know.
Yeah.
Until it's too late.
You don't know. But there are downstream symptoms.
I'm feeling this in my face, my arm, my back, like something, my gut doesn't feel good. There might be a
And it's
signal.
that constant superhighway of the brain-body connection, right? So these researchers at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, they found that neuroinflammation is a double-edged sword for nutritional diseases, metabolic diseases. All right, so what that means is inflammation in the brain is one of the primary causative factors of obesity.
So when you have inflammation in the brain, you're more likely to be obese.
And obesity is a causative agent for neuroinflammation.
So they both hurt each other.
So you're getting into this double-edged sword or vicious circle. And this is why, again, we tend to downplay or belittle people who are struggling with obesity, for example, and not knowing how many programs out there are telling you we need to target the inflammation in your brain for you to get well, for your metabolism to heal.
Yeah, the work that Dr. Daniel Amen is doing, which is, he says the bigger the body, the smaller the brain.
Yeah.
Your brain starts to shrink. I think that's accurate, if I remember. But it's like, and you want to really focus on both the nutritional side and the brain, make sure the brain is healthy. And you can heal and recover a lot of the brain from what I'm learning from my scan that I took there. there are ways to optimize the brain, even if you've heard it in a big way.
Yeah, that's
Right?
the beautiful part about us. And Daniel's a really good friend. If there's anybody who knows, it's him. He has the biggest database of SPECT imaging scans. He's looking at the brain. He's not just making it up.
Yeah.
And so this is a fact. I talked about this in Eat Smart as well. He actually wrote the cover quote for Eat Smarter.
Nice.
Man, I'm so grateful to have a friend like him because he's just such
great.
a wealth of knowledge. But one of the really interesting things is that as your waistline grows, your brain shrinks.
That's crazy.
Right? So we see that, and particularly the gray matter of the brain is going to be inhibited.
So obesity, what does that mean? Obesity impacts the quality of the brain?
Yeah.
And what if 65, 70% of Americans are now obese? That means they have smaller brains, which means they're not going to be able to perform as well. They're going to be more temperamental. They're going to be more mentally unwell, I'm assuming, have more mental health issues, potentially more depression, anxiety, and stress and overwhelm based on obesity.
You said it, man.
What do
this is where it really gets for us scary, because we look at the condition and we just like, and me being in this field, I've been in this field almost 20 years, and we'll just say if I got 30 family members, 28 of them are obese growing up. Like I grew up around
obesity,
that, But for me, my genetic cards were a little bit different because I ate worse than everybody. But I had asthma. I had.
Gotcha.
Of course, you know about the degenerative disc condition.
Yes.
So I had advanced arthritis when I was just a baby. Really, I was
So you had other painful side effects than obesity.
You're right.
By eating poorly.
Expressions. But my fat genes kicked in.
Yeah, eventually after 25, 30, you started to be like,
when I got to 20 and I stopped, because for me also, I was always very active as well. And so now I've got this chronic condition diagnosis, so-called incurable, nothing I can do about it. And now I was given a permission slip to do nothing, and so that's what I did. So again, in that state of learned helplessness.
Now, I'm going to ask something that might be controversial. There's a big movement of the accept yourself, self-love, no matter how big you are, small you are, like just love yourself where you're at. And, how do we love and accept people for where they're at without shaming them, but also encourage them to improve the quality of their health so that their brain gets bigger and healthier, so that they can live longer, so that they can perform better? Because from what I'm hearing, obesity is not something that's going to make you live longer and healthier.
Yeah, I love this question, man, because the first thing is, I love it because this conversation is bringing to light the fact that we've been inundated with an idea of what beauty looks like. We've been inundated with an idea that thin is better for many years. We've been inundated with an idea that you've got to look a certain way, you've got to have a certain complexion, certain eye color, whatever the case is, to be the epitome of what beauty is. And humanity is so beautiful, so diverse, and so gorgeous, so magical. There's so much beauty and expression, and there are cultures that are just thicker than a Snicker by nature. If you talk about, folks,
Polynesian cultures.
Polynesian culture, for example, incredible athletes, and they just right out of the gate, it's going to be a little bit thicker, but that's beautiful. It can be beautiful and it can be healthy. It depends on your genetics, on how much weight you carry and how healthily you can carry it. You maintain your insulin sensitivity, the health of your brain, the longevity, the list goes on and on. There are different, and this is one of the things that I really brought to the fold with Eat Smarter, is your unique metabolic fingerprint. And a part of that metabolic fingerprint is honoring your genetics, right? And so with that said, shifting the culture right now to honor our diversity and our variation of what beauty looks like, and not having this idea that having some body fat is something that's wrong or ugly. That's an absolutely terrible thing. The other part, and it's not even a but, it's and, so we have that acknowledgement, and we have to understand that if you have insulin resistance, you're pre-diabetic, or you're diabetic, or you have heart disease, or you have neural inflammation that we're talking a little bit about, you have allergies and asthma, list goes on and on and on, advanced arthritis, all these different conditions, all these underlying things that can take place, this is going to, in many ways, destroy your quality of life. And we want you to be healthy and a unique expression of what beauty is.
Yes.
That's it.
You don't have to be perfect and have a six pack and have like a certain amount of body fat, but you got to live a long time. Or if you want to live happy and healthy and not feel these kind of mental health issues as well, this will help that if you're healthier physically, right?
Absolutely, because that goes hand in hand with all the other things that we're seeing as a society, where we're losing so many people prematurely. You know, we're losing lives, but not just that, not just the actual loss of life, but the loss of life while people are still living.
Ooh, what do you mean by that?
When we fall into these places, I lost my grandmother, the love of my life, the love of my life. My grandfather, her and my grandfather were an entity, you know, and so we just had some friends over yesterday, and they were like, "You guys are the only married couple that we know that are like." And I'm just wondering how we have what we have, my wife and I, when I didn't have any examples of a healthy married couple. Like I just pretty much never saw it. But I lived with my grandmother when I was a little guy, when I was between the age of about, we'll say, 4 to 8 years old, right? So it's very formative. And for me, that was my earliest memories. And they're an entity, and I'm sure they had disagreements, but all I saw was love.
Wow.
All I saw was them, like his arm around her and just affectionate. She loved him literally to death. And so he ended up having multiple open heart surgeries.
Oh.
And you would think again, he was hunting, he was foraging, very like outdoor guy, but he was living under chronic stress in the city. He was a country boy, right? And so he was, in this environment, but also when he was noting like, okay, you got a high blood pressure, he also was a very angry guy, Well, he dealt with anger.
Yes.
But not towards us, but just his conditions that he came up around. So now this is very important. The physician, based on his preliminary blood work, which again, I wish I could have been there and to be able to intersect this, it was like, okay, you got to cut the fat. You need to switch out that butter and start to have this partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, which was country crock. It was the first time I saw country crock was in my grandfather's house. And he went from having some blood work issues to having a heart attack.
Oh, man.
To having open heart surgery, to him dying early.
Was he obese or no?
No, he looked incredibly fit.
Wow.
But that was his
Do you think it was more stress or the nutrition?
Primarily stress, I feel. Stress, and then also the nutrition that was added in on the recommendations of...
Didn't help.
Right, so we're going from something that's, quote, natural, that humans have been having for centuries, to something that was brand new and invented. And all the fat. I remember my grandmother getting him like the low-fat peanut butter. And I remember once I got older, I went to their house, I looked at it, it said fully hydrogenated vegetable oil in the peanut butter. And so it's like it's basically exposing it to more hydrogen to try to extend the shelf life of it. It kind of makes like in a strange way, vegetable oil plastic out of it in a sense. But anyways, so bottom line is this, and I'm glad I got a minute to talk about this because it's tough to talk about, but she was around for a while. She was there at my wedding. I felt like she stayed.
Wow.
I felt like she stayed to make sure that I was in good hands,
Wow.
But shortly after that, she died from an overdose. She was depressed. I didn't know.
Really?
And what the story goes, I don't know if she did it on purpose or not, but she took her medication and she died.
Shortly after the wedding, or?
Yeah, it's not too
Couple
long
months
after.
or
Maybe maybe a year later.
Yeah.
But I lost the love of my life outside of my wife to depression. And when he left here, like really her identity was so tied to him.
Man.
She loved him so much.
Man.
Yeah, so when I'm talking about this stuff, but also her health was going down as well. And I'm just now really starting to hit my stride in understanding this field and helping a lot of people. And, I didn't know, like my grandmother had diabetes, she had this, that issue. She had like the whole pill cabinet.
Oh, man.
And for me growing up in it, it was normalized, and yet we're treating symptoms. And so when we're not in a good state of health, the depression, it can be more invasive.
Yeah.
It can be harder to deal with. They come together. So
Hard to deal with. It's hard to get out of it.
Yeah.
my point that I want to share is when we're venturing into these outward states of inflammation, because even our fat cells themselves are an inflammatory factor. They're essentially putting out a distress signal that's letting your body think, in a sense, that you're infected. And the fat cells themselves are creating inflammation, right? If we talked about that again, that systemic chronic inflammation, it's just literally checking all boxes for a bad event to take place. Whether it's depression, which depression now we've got sound data on it having an inflammatory component, depression, heart attack, stroke, dementia, the list goes on and on and on. And a big catalyst for this, about 400,000 people die each year from obesity-related conditions. Really? And it's just a footnote.
Is that like they have type 2 diabetes, or they get stress, or they have heart attacks because of obesity, or what are those main?
Right. So these are comorbidities, right? So these are comorbidities.
They're obese, but they die from something else.
Right, right. But that's there.
400,000 people every year?
Every year, yeah.
You think if they weren't obese that they wouldn't die?
The obesity is it's kind of fueling the flames of the inflammation, for example. It's fueling the flames of the metabolic dysfunction.
Right.
Right. So
you could still look healthy and die of a heart attack. You hear that sometimes where it's like.
But today it's the exception, not the rule.
Right.
The majority of the time,
right.
It's related to being overweight and
Or
obese.
it's probably with stress or some type of like inner, stress. Maybe you don't look unhealthy, but inside you're not able to deal with anger or resentment or stress or shame or whatever it is.
Your thoughts are creating chemistry in your body.
Man, crazy, isn't it?
It is. It's powerful, man. There's a troubling discovery recently that SARS-CoV-2 is able to interact with the blood-brain barrier and enter the brain itself. Right?
What does that mean? How do you get it out of the brain?
That's the thing. Once it gets in there, it doesn't even matter. Like what are the downstream effects of that?